Gavrila Ardalionovich himself had confessed it to him, Afanasy Ivanovich, long ago, in a friendly way and out of the purity of his young heart, and it had long been known to Ivan Fyodorovich, the young man's benefactor. Finally, if he was not mistaken, Nastasia Philippovna herself had known of the young man's love for a long time, and it even seemed to him that she looked indulgently upon that love. Of course, it was hardest for him of all people to speak of it. But if Nastasia Philippovna would allow him, Totsky, apart from egoism and the desire to arrange his own lot, to wish her at least some good as well, she would understand that he had long found it strange and even painful to contemplate her solitude, that here there was only uncertain darkness, total disbelief in the renewal of life, which could so beautifully resurrect in love and a family, and thereby acquire a new purpose, that here were ruined abilities, perhaps brilliant ones, a voluntary reveling in her own sorrow, in short, even some sort of romanticism unworthy both of Nastasia Philippovna's common sense and of her noble heart. After repeating once again that it was harder for him to speak than for anyone else, he ended by saying that he could not give up the hope that Nastasia Philippovna would not reply to him with contempt if he expressed his sincere wish to secure her lot in the future and offer her the sum of 75,000 rubles. He added by way of clarification that in any case this sum had already been allotted to her in his will, in short, that this was in no way a compensation of any sort. And that, finally, why not allow an excuse in him the human wish to unburden his conscience at least in some way, and so on and so forth, all that is usually said on the subject in such cases. Afanasy Ivanovich spoke long and eloquently, having appended, in passing so to speak, the very curious piece of information that he was now mentioning the 75,000 for the first time and that no one knew of it, not even Ivan Fyodorovich himself, who was sitting right there, in short, no one knew. Nastasia Philippovna's answer amazed the two friends. Not only was there not the slightest trace to be observed in her of the former mockery, the former hostility and hatred, the former laughter, the mere recollection of which sent a chill down Totsky's spine, but, on the contrary, she seemed glad that she could finally speak with someone in an open and friendly way. She admitted that she herself had long wanted to ask for some friendly advice, that only pride had prevented her, but that now, since the ice had been broken, nothing could be better. At first with a sad smile, then with gay and brisk laughter, she confessed that the previous storm would in any case not be repeated, that she had long ago partly changed her view of things, and though she had not changed in her heart, she was still bound to allow for many things as accomplished facts. What was done, what was past, so that she even found it strange that Afanasy Ivanovitch could go on being so frightened. Here she turned to Ivan Fyodorovitch and, with a look of the profoundest respect, told him that she had long since heard a great deal about his daughters and was long accustomed to having a profound and sincere respect for them. The thought alone that she might be of at least some use to them would for her be a cause of happiness and pride. It was true that she now felt oppressed and bored, very bored. Afanasy Ivanovitch had divined her dreams. She would like to resurrect, if not in love, then in a family, with the consciousness of a new purpose, but of Gavrila Ardalionovitch she could say almost nothing. True, he seemed to love her. She felt that she herself might come to love him, if she could trust in the firmness of his attachment, but, even if sincere, he was very young. It was hard to decide here. Incidentally, she liked most of all the fact that he worked, toiled, and supported the whole family by himself. She had heard that he was an energetic and proud man, that he wanted a career, wanted to make his way. She had also heard that Nina Alexandrovna Ivolgin, Gavrila Ardalionovitch's mother, was an excellent and highly estimable woman, that his sister, Varvara Ardalionovna, was a very remarkable and energetic girl. She had heard a lot about her from Tin. She had heard that they endured their misfortunes cheerfully. She wished very much to make their acquaintance, but the question was whether they would welcome her into their family. In general, she had nothing to say against the possibility of this marriage, but there was a great need to think it over. She did not wish to be rushed. Concerning the 75,000, Afanasy Ivanovitch need not have been so embarrassed to speak of it. She understood the value of money and, of course, would take it. She thanked Afanasy Ivanovitch for his delicacy, for not having mentioned it even to the general, let alone to Gavrila Ardalionovitch, but anyhow, why should he not also know about it beforehand? She had no need to be ashamed of this money on entering their family. In any case, she had no intention of apologizing to anyone for anything, and wished that to be known. She would not marry Gavrila Ardalionovitch until she was sure that neither he nor his family had any hidden thoughts concerning her. In any case, she did not consider herself guilty of anything, and Gavrila Ardalionovitch had better learn on what terms she had been living all those years in Petersburg, in what relations with Afanasy Ivanovitch, and how much money she had saved. Finally, if she did accept the capital now, it was not at all as payment for her maidenly dishonor, for which she was not to blame, but simply as a recompense for her maimed life. By the end she even became so excited and irritated as she was saying it all, which, incidentally, was quite natural, that General Epanchin was very pleased and considered the matter concluded, but the once frightened Totsky did not quite believe her even now and feared for a long time that here, too, there might be a serpent among the flowers. 18 The negotiations nevertheless began, the point on which the two friends' whole maneuver was based, namely, the possibility of Nastasia Philippovna being attracted to Ganya, gradually began to take shape and justify itself, so that even Totsky began to believe at times in the possibility of success. Meanwhile Nastasia Philippovna had a talk with Ganya. Very few words were spoken, as if her chastity suffered from it. She admitted, however, and allowed him his love, but said insistently that she did not want to hamper herself in any way, that until the wedding itself, if the wedding took place, she reserved for herself the right to say no, even in the very last hour. Exactly the same right was granted to Ganya. Soon Ganya learned positively, by an obliging chance, that the hostility of his whole family towards this marriage and towards Nastasia Philippovna personally, which had manifested itself in scenes at home, was already known to Nastasia Philippovna in great detail. She had not mentioned it to him, though he expected it daily. However, it would be possible to tell much more out of all the stories and circumstances that surfaced on the occasion of this engagement and its negotiations, but we have run ahead of ourselves as it is, especially since some of these circumstances appeared only as very vague rumors. For instance, Totsky was supposed to have learned somewhere that Nastasia Filipovna, in secret from everyone, had entered into some sort of vague relations with the Epanchin girls, a perfectly incredible rumor. But another rumor he involuntarily believed and feared to the point of nightmare. He had heard for certain that Nastasia Filipovna was supposedly aware in the highest degree that Ganya was marrying only for money, that Ganya's soul was dark, greedy, impatient, envious, and boundlessly vain, out of all proportion to anything, that, although Ganya had indeed tried passionately to win Nastasia Filipovna over before, now that the two friends had decided to exploit that passion, which had begun to be mutual, for their own advantage, and to buy Ganya by selling him Nastasia Filipovna as a lawful wife, he had begun to hate her like his own nightmare. It was as if passion and hatred strangely came together in his soul, and though, after painful hesitations, he finally consented to marry the nasty woman, in his soul he swore to take bitter revenge on her for it and to give it to her later, as he supposedly put it. Nastasia Filipovna supposedly knew all about it and was secretly preparing something. Totsky was so afraid that he even stopped telling his worries to Epanchin, but there were moments when, being a weak man, he would decidedly feel heartened again and his spirits would quickly rise. He felt exceedingly heartened, for instance, when Nastasia Filipovna at last gave the two friends her word that on the evening of her birthday she would speak her final word. On the other hand, a most strange and incredible rumor concerning the esteemed Ivan Fyodorovitch himself was, alas, proving more and more true. Here at first sight everything seemed utterly wild. It was hard to believe that Ivan Fyodorovitch, in his venerable old age, with his excellent intelligence and positive knowledge of life, and so on and so forth, should be tempted by Nastasia Filipovna, and that, supposedly, to such an extent that the caprice almost resembled passion. Where he placed his hopes in this case is hard to imagine, perhaps even in the assistance of Ganya himself. Totsky at least suspected something of the sort, suspected the existence of some sort of almost silent agreement, based on mutual understanding, between the general and Ganya. As is known, however, a man too carried away by passion, especially if he is of a certain age, becomes completely blind and is ready to suspect hope where there is no hope at all. Moreover, he takes leave of his senses and acts like a foolish child, though he be of the most palatial mind. It was known that for Nastasia Philippovna's birthday the general had prepared his own present of an astonishing string of pearls, which had cost an enormous sum, and was very concerned about this present, though he knew that Nastasia Philippovna was an unmercenary woman. The day before Nastasia Philippovna's birthday he was as if in a fever, though he skillfully concealed it. It was precisely these pearls that Mrs. Epanchin had heard about. True, Elizaveta Prokofyevna had long ago begun to experience her husband's frivolity and was somewhat used to it, but it was impossible to overlook such an occasion. The rumor about the pearls interested her exceedingly. The general had perceived it just in time. Certain little words had already been uttered the day before. He anticipated a major confrontation and was afraid of it. That was why he was terribly reluctant, on the morning on which we began our story, to go and have lunch in the bosom of his family. Before the prince's arrival, he had resolved to use the excuse that he was busy and get out of it. To get out, for the general, sometimes simply meant to get away. He wanted to gain at least that one day and, above all, that evening, without any unpleasantnesses. And suddenly the prince came along so opportunely. As if sent by God. The general thought to himself as he entered his wife's rooms. The general's wife was jealous of her origins. Imagine her feelings when she was told, directly and without preliminaries, that this Prince Mishkin, the last of their line, whom she had already heard something about, was no more than a pathetic idiot and nearly destitute, and that he took beggars' alms. The general was precisely after that effect, in order to draw her interest all at once and somehow turn everything in another direction. In extreme cases his wife usually rolled her eyes out exceedingly and, with her body thrown slightly back, stared vaguely ahead of her without saying a word. She was a tall, lean woman, of the same age as her husband, with much gray in her dark but still thick hair, a somewhat hooked nose, hollow yellow cheeks, and thin, sunken lips,